For a closer look at economic woes here and abroad, we turn to Scheherazade Rehman. She's director of the European Union Research Center and professor of international finance at George Washington University. And Scheherazade, teetering governments, debt downgrades. In the U.S., positive GDP growth, but not as much as people expected. Is there a thread that connects these data points, a pattern in all of this?
Well, I think the pattern is pretty clear. We in the United States are experiencing very, very slow growth. And what we are seeing in Europe is that they're getting worse very fast.
Well, you saw David Cameron run down the litany of overburdened debt in British institutions. Is confidence flagging in Britain that the Cameron medicine is working?
Well, I think, the question is, is this the right medicine for the right time? And this is not just for the UK, this is for all of Europe. Too much austerity, we know, yields no growth, and we are seeing the results of this right now. And no growth means no jobs and no debt repayments down the road. And so this is a recipe for asking for trouble, and we are seeing this in governments. The French president lost the first round of elections. In 8 days, he's going to go for the second round. It doesn't look very good, but this is a natural byproduct of not doing enough crisis management.
So when you say crisis management, you mean cutting when times are good so you're prepared when times are bad?
Absolutely. That's what Germany did. But now times are very, very bad. We're in the middle of a crisis. And yes, austerity measures will yield growth in the long run and things will get much better. But in the middle of a crisis, we need to do a lot more in terms of stimulating and providing liquidity. And it was only after almost 2 years, last November, that the Europeans got their act together with a new European Central Bank governor, Mario Draghi, who did aggressive crisis management, and things were beginning to get a little bit better. The problem is, it's the same scenario. Is it too little and too late now? Because Spain is now on the brink.
Now, all the countries we're talking about are democracies. Is there a conversation back and forth between politics and economics? Can the economic technicians and mechanics keep on doing their work without hearing from the people?
And the answer is no. One of the biggest uncertainties in the market right now is government execution risks. We are seeing election cycles in the United States. We know nothing is going to happen for the next year, at least, nothing major. We are seeing it all over Europe, and governments are basically frozen because they are being voted out of office. There's too much pain on the ground.
So, is there a rebellion gathering against austerity?
I believe so. I believe that they're going to have to ease off, and the market is a little bit afraid of this because austerity programs have been promised, certain countries had bailouts, and there will be a backlash against this. And when that happens, markets will become even more anxiety-ridden. Look, today, every little shock dips us down into an anxiety zone, and any little piece of good news exhilarates us. And we are going to see this to go on probably for another few years at least.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Spain, because they didn't do the kind of overborrowing that got some of the earlier crisis countries into trouble. Their problems really started with the burst of a real estate bubble. But now that they are lowering the targets for percentage of GDP that the government can borrow, but they've got a shrinking GDP, they have to keep borrowing less and less. Government can't prime the pump. Government can't kickstart the economy.
You're absolutely right. And don't forget, government borrowing costs are going up. Spain is now crossing the threshold of over 6% for its borrowing costs for its bonds. And when it hits 7%, they're in trouble. That's about the mark when Greece, Ireland, and Portugal began to talk about bailouts. And the moment we talk about Spanish bailout and becomes a serious issue, then the other shoe drops, which we are very afraid of, and that's Italy. If the contagion spreads to Italy, and they have a liquidity problem right now, if that turns into a solvency problem, then there's going to be some real trouble ahead.
But isn't Spain paying its debts? Why this cycle where you're sort of chasing yourself down the sink, really?
Well, and that's why some crisis management up front would have helped. It would have helped in terms of, and with the austerity packages, mind you. It's just when the markets panic, they don't see the discrepancy and the differences between the different economies. Southern Europe just looks all the same. and they're applying the same kind of remedy, which is going to yield a very specific result, and that is no growth or a contraction, which is exactly what we're seeing in most of these countries.
Well, you've got what's going on in Europe, and then you've got North America, these two giant economic zones. Do they talk it back and forth with each other? Can failure in one inevitably spread to the other, or success in one create a virtuous cycle and lead to better times in the other?
And I think this is a very good question. The problem is that we are experiencing such slow growth. Is this growth sustainable between 2 and 3%? Yes, of course. But the real question in the United States is this growth enough for what we have experienced to recover in our jobs market? Is it enough for us to recover the wealth loss that has happened over the last 4 years? And the answer is no, it's not enough. And so our very, very slow growth, although helpful to Europe, by no means are going to drag them out of the problems that they have. And anything going south in Europe will most definitely slow us down even more.
So that bad times in Europe can take that 2.2 GDP down even further.
Absolutely.
Scheherazade Rehman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.